Hi there, folks. Welcome back. Here is a slide deck that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. And I call this science versus truth versus uncertainty. So let's get a quick overview here. First, we have whatever that is, like 16 slides or so. No, that's not right. Yeah, 16 slides. So that's what we have to get ready for. So this time use the present mode to look at the slide deck with the notes. So we're gonna bring this up and think about, sort of move this over. So we have the slide here on the left, and we have our notes, if you will, on the right. So let's go through this. Opinions versus facts, right? So here's the thing, right? What we think of as humans is not just controlled by science. That's a pretty obvious statement. I think we all agree with that. There's other things that influence the way we think, right? Faith, culture, politics, economics, all kinds of other things. So that's important to remember. What we think, what we believe, our opinions, right, are not simply controlled by scientific facts. And, you know, this can create what might be irrational behavior, right? We might, as humans, and do that all the time, right, prefer not to deal with unpleasant truths, right? We are sort of like, we like this idea of maybe comforting lies, right? And we'll talk about the term truth later, but that's something interesting to remember. And when you sort of look at this in terms of scientific questions, you have this fascinating sort of gap, if you will, between, on one hand, what scientists think about, for example, the safety of eating genetically modified foods and what the US population thinks, right? There's a big gap here of about 50%, right? And you can look at the different examples here. Vaccines, for example, evolution, animal research. There's always a big gap between the scientific experts and their opinions versus the US public, right? Fascinating thing, right? Because in theory, right, if science were everything that were the only thing that could be controlling our opinion, then there really shouldn't be a gap between the scientists and the public. Now, a few examples here. This is related to climate change. Climate change is mostly due to human activity. There's an overwhelming number here in terms of the scientific opinion, and there's only about half of the US population shares that opinion. So in this case, about a 37% gap. Absolutely fascinating. So what's going on here? Well, you should really watch this video. This is a great video that kind of explains this idea of confirmation bias, right? I'm not going to play the video. I'm not going to run a YouTube video inside a YouTube video, but you should go into the slide deck, watch this video. It runs about 6 minutes. Fascinating stuff. The example she uses in this video is climate change, but of course, the same arguments can apply to many other controversial scientific issues. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of motivated reasoning and confirmation biases. The definition is right here. And this is something that we all engage in, right? We like to sort of cherry pick, if you will, things that confirm what we already think, right, is correct. Right, so this idea of this idea of like, hey, whatever new information we read, we kind of filter through this idea what we already think, and then we accept the information that confirms our previous beliefs, and then we reject the information that disagrees with our previous beliefs. That's sort of what's called the confirmation bias, or sometimes also called motivated reasoning. There's another term that's important here called cultural cognition. That's what's called the echo chamber, right? So we tend to do or think whatever makes us closer to our friends and social circles, right? So the cultural social circles we move in, that we live in, kind of shape what we think, right? And we tend to sort of support opinions, positions that reinforces the connections that we have with our community, right? We call that cultural cognition. So that's important things to think about when you think about scientific information and how we look at scientific information in the context of what we already think, what we already believe, and what maybe the opinion is of the group, social circle, group of friends, our tribe, our community, whether or not it agrees with the position of our community, right? Now, I want to show you this. This is a movie poster, right? You can Google this, An Inconvenient Truth. Doesn't really matter so much. It's getting a little dated these days. But what I want to sort of thinking about is that movie title, An Inconvenient Truth. That's always bugged me. I always hated the title. I liked the movie. I think it was great and we used it as a teaching tool. But I never liked the title, An Inconvenient Truth. Right? And let me tell you why. See, science doesn't deal with truth. You cannot find truth through science, right? Neither can science tell you what is inconvenient, right? Truth is something you can find in your belief system, in your faith, in your spirituality, right? You can hold things to be true even though there's no scientific evidence for it, even though you cannot test for it empirically, right? But you can hold it to be true, and that's perfectly okay, and you have every right to do so, right? Science deals with observable, testable evidence and hypotheses. Science doesn't do truth, right? That's a really important distinction, right? If you want truth or certainty, you cannot go to science, right? Let's talk about this a little bit more. This is important. A couple of quotes I really want you to read here. Science, except in trivial cases, cannot produce indisputable proof or truth. Science can produce a robust consensus based on a process of inquiry that is subject to continued scrutiny, re-examination, and revision, right? And then we've already seen this Einstein quote. Science can only ascertain what is, right? What's observable, what's natural, but not what should be. And outside of science, right, value judgments, morality, ethics are necessary, right? So, except in trivial cases, you cannot find proof, you cannot find truth in science. What you can find is uncertainty reduction. The idea that the error bars, that the uncertainty related to our knowledge is constantly decreasing. So now this is a problem, right? How do you now make decisions? If you are in a local area or regional, national, global level, right? How do you make socially responsible science-based decisions, right? You know, science is not the only thing that impacts decision making. There's other things, right? Here's just a few: politics, faith, economics, power systems, all kinds of stuff influence decision making. You know, should science be the only thing in decision making? We'll talk about that. Let's talk about these limits of science, and that's important, right? So let's step through this. Number one, science cannot offer you 100% certainty or proof. That doesn't work. Here's a great quote. There's no need to wait for proof, no need to demand it, and no basis to expect it. You cannot turn to science. You cannot ask Dr. Fauci. You cannot ask the CDC for 100% certainty. It'll never happen. It's impossible, right? And that's especially true with earth sciences or public health science, epidemiology, where there are so many variables involved, right? Here's what the scientific process can do for you. It can eliminate mistakes, right? Produce more and more reliable results, and gradually reduces uncertainty and thereby increases certainty. So what science really is engaged in is uncertainty reduction, right? Okay. Now what do we do, right? Now how do we make decisions, right? You have to decide at which point, right, the error bars are small enough that there's proof enough for you and others to take action. Right? That's the whole idea. Right? Science provides more and more certain results, never 100% certainty. And at some point, right, 90%, 95%, whatever that limit is, maybe it's 60%, right? The uncertainty is small enough that you might decide, yep, okay, that is proof enough for me, and now I have a justification to take an action. Really, really critical limits of science here, right? If you want to wait until it's 100% proven and 100% certain that X will happen, you will never make a decision. You will never take any action based on science, because science can never give you 100% certainty. Great cartoon here, all right? Got a Calvin Hobbes cartoon on the left and a nice quote here from David Keith. So those are the limits of science, right? And we have to be aware of that. So now we have to think about how we operate in the space. How do we make decisions? And I just want to show the last slide here with, you know, our triangle, if you will, science, politics, and faith. Somewhere in there is human thought. You can put you can make this into many more corners. You can put economics, social status, you know, oppression. You can put all kinds of things here that together shape human thought. It's not about science, right? We have this idea that, you know, we tend to prefer comforting lies as opposed to pleasant truth. And we have this sort of, you know, often situation where we say, hey, we have a gut feeling, and we tend to value that higher maybe as scientific evidence. And so what I want you to think about is your limits of science, right? Your own limits. So think about examples, situations where science was not at all helpful to you. Or think about decisions that you have made, or that you will have to make, or that you can make in the future, where you cannot use the scientific method to give you good options, right? What are your own limits of science? So I'd like you to ponder that a little bit, all right? So let's get out of this. Here's our slide deck, all right? And once again, this is a YouTube video, so remember, you can stop, you can pause, you can go forward, you can go backward, you can go faster, you can go slower, and of course, you can also look at the slide deck. And remember this awesome video that's embedded in the slide deck here, so please watch that. All right? Thank you very much.